Hi friends. You'll have to excuse me for my voice. I am recovering from a terrible cold, but I feel a lot better than I sound. So I'm fine. I can do this. It's 2022. Happy New Year. So I actually wanted to do a video that talks about my goals, reading goals for this year, and also kind of wanted to do a little recap of like last year. Not an extensive one. I don't want to really cover all the books I've read last year because I've read a lot. I don't remember if the final tally was 130 or 31 books. Roughly, yeah, that was it. It's weird. I've realized that no matter what, it's never gonna feel like I've read enough. And that's a very me problem. This year, I have actually set my goals for again, as I did last year, for 50 books because I don't know what life is gonna throw at me. Just because I've managed to do a lot last year doesn't mean I'm gonna repeat that experience because, yeah, you never know. So like this is an achievable goal. I think I can manage to do 50 in any year, even my busiest year. I think if I can keep at it, I'm sure I can do 50. So 50 is the goal. Another thing I want to do is like be more mindful when I read, like more present in the books I read this year. It's easy to read fiction in a very fast paced manner, but with non-fiction, you really do sometimes have to pay attention, especially if it's like technical or historical. I know I'm gonna pass 50 unless something monumental, dramatic happens this year, that again changes our lives. I know I'll cross 50, but if I don't, that's fine too. So yeah, that's one of the goals. I was also thinking about like what kind of books I wanted to read this year. So I want to read a few more classics. I do try to like at least every few months pick up a classic and read it. I don't know. It's not that I haven't read enough. It's you read how much ever you can, There's no required amount of classics that you do need to read, but I've been reading a lot of retellings of certain classic books and I haven't even read the books yet. So I'm just like, maybe if I want to truly appreciate a retelling, I should know what it's retelling. So I'd like to read a few more classics and maybe even do like a comparison stuff like with the retellings and see how they hold up, right? Indian authors is another thing I want to read a lot more of. In African authors, I feel like Nigerian authors are the most like prolific. We hear a lot more about them. Most of the books I'm aware of are by Nigerian authors, and they're really good. I don't know what it is. The schooling system there, do they have a really good literary program? I have no idea what's happening, but they're killing it. I do read a decent amount of Asian authors, Chinese. There's one or two Vietnamese, South Korean, Japanese. Yeah, there's been a few in the mix. So I feel like I even covered East Asian, but Indian authors I am woefully ignorant of. I've read a few. It's not like I've never read any Indian authors, but it's just I tend to judge them a little too harshly. Maybe it's because it's my culture that they're talking about. Or something I have like a more first-hand experience of it, and maybe that though like even American culture I feel like it is somehow kind of my culture too because it was what I was educated in, so it's like I don't know, either way, but there's like there's a lot of diversity in like kind of Indian books and authors out there. I maybe am only exposed to what's popular, and we all know what's popular is not necessarily always what's good. So I'm going back and trying to read a lot more Indian authors. I have read a lot of non-Indian non-fiction before because, politics and all, history I'm a little interested in. So I have a ton of those books. I've recently ordered a lot of fiction books, and I'm going to work my way through them. I'm not going to list all of them. It's a huge pile and it's growing. But I think that's going to take a year. I'm not going to finish them all in a month. The thing is like focus a little bit on genres that I don't have that much experience in. So I do decent in like contemporary fiction, romance, fantasy, even thrillers. I'm more or less getting acquainted. Horror, not as much. I haven't read enough horror, so I would like to spend a little more time with horror genre specifically this year, and maybe even science fiction. So I do fantasy, magical realism and all, but like not pure science fiction. So I think I'd want a little more of that too in my reading. Poetry is hard. Yeah, I think I need to take another crack at it, but I don't know if I want to do it this year. We'll see. Poetry is on like the back burner. If I get the time, if I change my mind halfway through the year, I might get to poetry, but right now, not really hyper focused on it. Yeah, that's about it. And I have like four more categories I wanted to talk about. One was authors that I wanted to read from this year. Authors that are, you know, around and I've never read a single book by them, so I would like to try them out. Another was I wanted to look back at some of the best books I read in 2021. Actually, that's a wrong way to put it. Best, not in the sense of like this is probably the best book written, but this is the book that has stayed with me. Like they still exist in my head. Like some of them are not even like the best book written. I might have even given them 3 stars when I rated them, but they've managed to live in my head. These characters or these stories or the ideas presented have stayed with me, and that's why like they're the most important books to come out of 2021 for me. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was some of my most anticipated books for this year. So let's get into authors. So the authors I kind of want to check out that I haven't really had a chance to. I'm just going to list them. I don't know why. E. Schwab, who's a science fiction author. He has a book coming out this year, and there's a few that exist before. I can't, on the top of my head, think of any books. Life of Addie something, that's one. In the Darkness, is that a title? I'm so bad, guys. I should have researched this more. But E. Schwab is a science fiction fantasy author, right? And I want to check out at least one book by him to see what all the bustle is about. Margaret Atwood, I've read a book of poetry by her, and I know she wrote The Handmaid's Tale, and she has a really good Twitter account. Well, I don't know if she's tweeting as much anymore, but she used to be very, like, snappy on Twitter. I feel like I've read her work, but I actually haven't. I've not read any of her novels or her short stories. So has she published short stories? Who knows? So I'd like to at least read one thing by her, because poetry is not my strong suit, so I can't really judge an author well by their poetry collection. So I'd like to read a novel. Not that I have any right to judge Margaret Atwood, but you know, I'm still doing it. I'm judging all the authors. Those who can't teach do, I guess. Oh no, that's a terrible saying. Okay, Tana French. Tana French, is that how you say it? I actually know nothing about this author. I just know one of my friends really likes her, shall we? And she also is really into books, so she likes her, so I want to check her out for that reason alone. That's it. I mean, you sometimes trust a person's opinion, right? Ta-Nehisi Coates, who writes non-fiction, I believe, mostly. He's written a few on the Obama administration and other stuff. I don't know, because I haven't read him, what exactly he writes, but I'd like to read. Okay, I'm going to butcher a lot of the names today, just let's not. Another person is Hanya Yanagihara. She wrote, it's not a they. Is it a they? I don't think so. I don't want to assume anyone's gender identity, but... so she wrote A Little Life, which wrecked a lot of people who read it. It's a long book. She has a book coming out. Is it out? It might be out like yesterday, or I don't know, sometime in January, called To Paradise is her. I don't know if it's her second book, but it's the second one I'm hearing of. So either one of the books I'd like to read, because she's everyone that talks about her only has good things to say. It might be a devastating book to read, A Little Life, but I think I should take the time out to check it out. Contemporary fiction, there's Brett Bennett, Otessa Moshfegh, Andy Weir, who's a science fiction author who wrote The Martian, and he's also really popular. He always gets nominated, if nothing, for the popular Goodreads Awards. Again, I want to check out the writing. Taylor Jenkins Reid, who did Malibu Rising, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, Daisy Jones and the Six. I don't know if all the books are in this format, but I know Daisy Jones and the Six is in the format of oral history. And I kind of like that style. That was the style employed in the revival tour of Opal and Nev. And I really enjoyed that. And there was a lot of comparisons between these two books, so I'm excited to check out Jenkins Reid. I mean, just popular authors that I keep hearing about that I haven't actually read, like J.D. Smith, Riley Sager, Rachel Hawkins. I don't think I've read a single thing by Murakami, so yeah, I know it's kind of a sin. I will check out Murakami too. Actually, no, I've read his non-fiction book about running. That doesn't quite count, does it? Ooh, I had a coughing fit. Pretending like vitamin C is gonna help me with the situation, even though it's just glorified sugar water, but whatever. There's a lot of authors, guys. I'm just, yeah, that's some of the authors. The books that have made the most impact on me in the last year were Skincare by Caroline Hirons and Clean by James Hamblin. I actually did an entire video about skincare way back in February last year. And it's funny because these books are kind of the opposite. One's just talking about all the products you can use for your skin, and this one's like, don't use products. Like, you know, your skin can survive on pretty much nothing. And they both kind of do inform my decisions when it comes to skincare and how I understand it. This one's a little more science heavy, but it also like helped me think about the marketing of a product, why I feel obliged or inspired to buy a product. It helps me break down my decision-making process. Empire of Pain by Patrick Radden Keefe. This is about the opioid epidemic, and I actually keep referencing this book in conversations here and there. I really enjoyed this book, and I would like to check out more stuff he puts out. He has a book coming out this year, somewhere in the summer, and I still haven't read Say Nothing, which is about the Irish. I don't know in what capacity. All I know it's set in Northern Ireland. About the conflict, maybe. Oh, also Kitchen Confidential gets a shout out. Also really dug that book when I read it. That's by Anthony Bourdain. It's even before Anthony Bourdain became really popular. It was his first book he ever put out, and before he had a TV show or anything. So it was really an outsider's perspective on the restaurant world. And it's pretty cool. So there's The Puppy War by R.F. Kuang. This is fantasy fiction, and whoa, I was wrong. I thought, like, by reading the title, I did a whole discussion about how this might be about like the poppy trade between China and Britain and all of that. And like, you know, it's fantasy inspired by that, but not at all. It's actually about like the rape of Nanjing, which is a very, very dark period. Like, you know, the atrocities Japan committed to Chinese citizens. Oh my God, oh my God. I am aware that at different points in history, different people have committed atrocities. Japanese on Chinese, Chinese on Tibetans, and Muslims and other ethnic minorities. Everyone's done this one way or another, but like there's a kind of horror to like what Japan did to China that's just like incomprehensible. And this book does not shy away from it. It's purely fantasy. At no point is China name-checked or Japan name-checked. It's all different regions. The names are different. If you have the historical background or context, you'll pick up on it right away. If you don't, you would actually not connect this to any country. You would be like, oh, this is clearly the villain. Look at the horrible stuff they're doing. And then if you like look up the rape of Nanjing, then you'd be like, oh, this actually happened. Like, really, really happened. But take away the magical, mythical elements of this book, it's rough. Look, I will say this, it's kind of a little bit of a messy book. There's a lot of character inconsistencies, and at times I got really frustrated with what was happening with the book, but it was also kind of wonderful. Even the mistakes it made was just like so big and grandiose and all of this that it was like, I'm like, it's fine, I'll forgive you. You know how like with movies, and it makes so many creative choices, experimental choices, that even if you don't agree with all of them, you're just like sitting there going like, but I am here for it. I'm just, if this is how you need to hone your craft to get to like a masterpiece later, then do it. I'm here for it. Because this book, oof, wrecked me, was all over the place, but that imagery and some of the bold choices will stay with me. It's a lot. I would not recommend this to everyone because you will cry, but it's really good. It's really good. It's also the whole Chosen One story also. In like the first half of the book is very like Hogwartsy in the sense like, you know, they go to a magical school and are learning things and yada yada yada. Or the second half is like there's a conflict and a war and a destiny they have to fulfill of sorts. So in that, it's a very tropey story, but like the way they go about it, just, yeah, check it out. Another book that now lives rent-free in my head is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. There's nothing I could say that's new about Leo Tolstoy. I don't understand how a person, an author, can have this much knowledge about every single thing a human feels. Like the whole spectrum of human emotions are covered in this book, and human experiences too. Like it's just pure mastery, and I'm sure there's criticisms to this book. I haven't delved into that yet, but now I would definitely have to revisit this book because it's not something you read once and you're done with. I wish I had people to read this book with, just so that I can talk about it and debate it with and break it apart, because I would want this to be etched into my head. A couple of books. This is Where the Crawdads Sing. This was the first book from my book club. I picked it and I took a lot of notes. And that might be the reason this book is so important to me and like meant a lot, because I read it very, very closely. Or maybe it's actually a brilliant book, even if you disregard all of that. I can never disassociate the two, like what it means to me personally and what the book is. Like they're intertwined and I can't make an objective, rational decision. But I think it's a pretty darn good book. Like the main character, Kaya, is a voice in my head. There's books I've read since I've read this book where I'm just like constantly comparing the character traits of new protagonists to Kaya and like comparing like where they like fall. And it's weird like how she has become this benchmark in my head. Not necessarily to like a perfect character, but like, you know, having like a person containing multitudes, like who's very gray. Like, you know how you know, sometimes feel like you know a person so well, you know what they'll do next. I feel that way about Kaya. I feel like I know the character well enough to know how they'll act, but I cannot pass judgment about their moral standing. I don't know if she's a good person or a bad person, or ethically right or ethically wrong. Like those are not judgments I can pass, but I understand her innately, which is just... it's a really good book. It's not too heavy, actually. Like, you know, a lot of contemporary fiction is very dun dun dun, very like heavy and dark and sometimes dense, but this isn't. Before I read it, I kind of made a comparison to To Kill a Mockingbird, and I think that actually holds up. Yeah, pretty darn good. This was the last book I read in 2021. Taking away my personal connection and feelings for this book, I can see how it might not be like the most brilliant book out there, but it felt like the most brilliant book out there. First of all, this is a Marathi translation, so it was written by Sachin Kundalkar, but it's translated by Jerry Pinto, and how I wish I could actually understand and read Marathi and read this in its original iteration, but I can't, so this is English is what I get out of it. There's three characters that it's primarily about. We don't get one of the characters' names, so it's these two siblings, Thane and Anuja, who kind of fall in love with the same guy who's a paying guest in their house, and have like vastly different experiences with him. So like the first half of the book is narrated from Tane's perspective, and he has no clue that there's a whole other side to this guy where, you know, he has a story with a sister. It's not narrated in a chronological way. We go back and forth. And then the second half is from Anuja's perspective. It's narrated in first person. Like when Tane's half, Tane is the one narrating the story to us. And his personality comes through in the writing too, because it's very repetitive. It goes in circles and circles, as though he's trying to like retell the story. Sometimes using the same words over and over again, like same passages come up over and over again with slight different changes, as though he's trying to find an answer in there somewhere. And it's just, it felt like, you know, I was inside someone's brain, and it was pretty brilliant. And the second half is from Anuja's perspective. And she's kind of in this really sad place in her life, and you do see she has a very different personality from her brother Tane, and she's more like always like criticizing herself or being pessimistic before someone else has a chance to call it. You know, the kind of thing where you want to be the person that points out all your weaknesses or all your faults before someone else does it. So their personalities come through, and it's just, I love the whole how the same event can look very different from different people's perspective, which is not necessarily that you're unreliable, it's just your experience of it is different, and you can only at any given point narrate your experience. even if you try your best to put yourself in other people's shoes, there's only so much you can do. So it's still not a full story. Like, we get Tane's perspective and we get her perspective, but we don't get the paying guest, the unnamed paying guest perspective. So it's still not a full story. We can only piece together what he must have felt, what he must have gone through based on their two different halves. So it's in a way unfinished, and you have to, as a reader, fill in the gaps of certain motivation, and it's just a wonderful book. I love it. I genuinely love this book. It reminded me of Call Me By Your Name. See, Call Me By Your Name has a very special place in my heart because I think some of the passages about love and like the messiness of it is unsurpassed, and I love it. But like, this is an Indian context of it. Like, you know, this is rooted in something I inherently understand, which Call Me By Your Name could have never done, because I'm not Italian. My brain doesn't automatically fill in the gaps for what was culturally unsaid there, but here it does. I can fill in the gaps. I understand the exact thing or feeling an author is talking about because it feels like foundational underlying things in my life. So it's just, yes, thank you for the gender fluidity, the messiness, and just, you know, here's a hidden gem, finally. Read it, it's awesome. If you hate it, don't tell me. I don't want to know. Let's shout out to Emily Henry's People We Meet on Vacation. I love Emily Henry. I love People We Meet on Vacation. And I think I've already talked about this, but like, I'm gonna say it again. It's not just a nice romantic comedy. It's friends to lovers, which is one of my favorite tropes because I have a hard time relating to characters that instantly fall in love. I kind of make fun of them in my head, being like, you idiot, why? You don't know this person. Gut feelings are nothing, okay? There's no destiny, there's no soulmates, just shut up. So like, I only ever respect a character if it goes from like a long relationship. It doesn't have to be friendship, it can be even like a long courtship, but you know, just don't instantly fall in love, which doesn't compute for my head. So I love this book. I also like The Love Hypothesis, which is another popular book by Ali Hazelwood. Yes, and it's everywhere. It's on Instagram, it's on TikTok, it's on YouTube, it's on every single thing. So I don't need to say anything about the book. It's pretty good. If you haven't heard of it, just Google it, guys. It's really popular. The hype is more or less right. It's pretty darn good. Slight issues, but yeah. But you know, you don't need to have like a perfect book from a romance author. It's fine if there's issues. Perfect on Paper, which I forgot the author's name. Sorry. It's a YA romance. I was genuinely surprised by this book is because I actually haven't heard of it anywhere. So I've realized in the LGBTQIA plus genre, I tended to read a lot more books that were M on M, which is men on men, like, you know, gay romances. And I've only read a couple where it was female on female, F on F, transgender and anything. So I've always found it a lot harder to relate to like F on F, like female on female romances, because I don't know, there was just like this lack of connectivity for me, and I was trying to figure out what was it in my upbringing, in my social construct that was creating this barrier for me where I couldn't relate. And I was kind of feeling shitty because I'm like, how do I dismantle this conditioning before anyone like figures it out and points a finger at me and says you are homophobic, which I'm not. I'm just trying to understand something I'm not well versed in. And this book, finally this book, the main character, don't remember the name, but she's bisexual. The person she's been crushing on her whole life is her best friend. And then she also meets this guy. There's like this whole fake dating situation that happens, but like, you know, the romance and all are really cute in the book. I will say it's a solid romance, but what made the book for me is that the main character explained the struggles of bisexuality. I've heard this comment a lot where like, you know, if you're bisexual, why not just pick the opposite gender and just like make your life easier? So if you're a man, if you're attracted to men and women, why not just, you know, be attracted to women, you know, make your life less complicated. And I've heard this argument a lot, and it also kind of comes up in this book where like, you know, bisexual people are like looked down upon by the queer community because people assume that they kind of have it easy, that they can pick or pretend to be straight if they want to, and that, you know, they're somehow less queer. And oof, the way this book dismantles and says, no, we are as queer, we earn our place here, just shush. And it was done so well. It was a really good book. What else? Oh, 7 Days in June is another book that I loved. But it might be one of my favorite romances to come out of 2021. Both the protagonists in this book are authors. I don't know why authors like to write about people in the literature community, literati. I think maybe it's because they understand it the best. If I would ever write, I think I would write better about people I understand, which, people who like to read a lot. So I get it, but it works in this book for anyone in the book community, like the reading, writing, or whatever part of the book community. Like, there's a lot in there that you'd enjoy. Easter eggs just for us. And if you don't also, this book is pretty darn good. It's a good balance between like the serious, the reality of the world, and like a romance, which tends to be very like, everything's gonna work out in the end, happy-go-lucky. And it's still a romance, everything is gonna go work out in the end, but there's a lot of shit that happens that you can't just push under the rug. So it was a good meeting of the two, and I liked it. A few more to mention. One is The Final Girl support group by Grady Hendrix, which is just a thriller. And it's a really fun, cool take on the final girl tropes. If you watch the movie The Cabin in the Woods, which is a very meta take on the thriller genre, there's like usually this archetypical characters in the horror genre, and they do die in a sequence. They're usually the black character who dies first, the slut character, who's usually the one who's a lot more promiscuous, dies. The jockey, the boisterous macho man dies. All of these characters die in a certain sequence. The last surviving character, who's kind of a stand-in for the audience because it's a kind of a plain white canvas where we can imagine ourselves in that person's place, but they also tend to be white and innocent and virginal or pure in some context, and not liberal, not conservative, somewhere in the middle, someone who's going to be the least offensive and we'll all root for. And that always is the character that survives. And this book takes that and just has the most fun with it. It's just something so new and creative and done in a way that's audacious that I am willing to forgive the frankly very, very, very big mistakes it made, but I'm willing to forgive them. So the concept is like, there's a support group for all these final girls, but like, imagine if all the famous franchises like the Scream, Aliens, all of the final surviving girls, they all were real. That these events actually kind of happened in real life, and they all have this one girl that survived. So they all have a support group where they're not able to get over their trauma. So they meet once in a while, and they all have their own baggage that they carry, their own insecurities, and all these weird things. And then suddenly one day they all start dying one by one. They're being targeted. It's a really cool thriller. It's very meta. It breaks down the sexism that's involved in these tropes, but also the cinematic tropes, the book tropes, our understanding of the final girl, expectations from it, our expectations from horror and thriller movies and books. So it's great. I think if you're a fan of horror or thriller, you should definitely check out this book. I'm just gonna say White Tiger. I have no energy to talk about this book. I really liked White Tiger too because it calls to attention all the class differences that are prevalent in India, and it has a lot to say about him, a really good discourse on it. There's 2 more books that I missed out. I actually have to do a much longer discussion on these books. One of it is part of a series, and it's called Empress of Salt and Fortune. It's by a Vietnamese author. I just forgot the name. Boo is the last name, I believe. So that's part of a series. So I think I want to read a few more books in the series before I do a review of that collection, which frankly, it's a novella, and it blew my mind of how much it accomplished. The storytelling, the world building, the weird, magical, imagination-breaking things that happen in that book. It's just, it's really good, but I have to read more. So I'll get back to you about that book later. And another one I loved, really absolutely adored, was Open Water by Caleb Nazuma. Again, another brilliant book. I was telling some of my friends about this book the other day, of how the male main protagonist narrates the book, but he narrates it in third person, and it's weird. So he talks about himself like, he did that, but he's talking about himself. So it's just a very weird, cool, stylistic choice. But it's just like, it's also a novella. It's a very short book, but there's so many things I love about that book which I can't possibly cover right now. So I'll have to do a longer study of it. I'm going to reread that book this year because that's another thing I want to do. I want to reread some of my favorite books and spend more time just letting them sink in. So, you know, that's looking back. What I'm looking forward to is also like books that are coming out this year. I actually have an Excel sheet to like document 50 or 60 books that are coming out in the next 6 months that I must read. Yeah, if I read them alone, I would go over my goals. I've only read 2 books that came out this year, no? No, I only read 1 book that came out this year, which was the Emma Lord book, When You Get the Chance, which was good, guys. If you want to check it out, check it out. It's really good. Solid trilogy by Emma Lord. Looking forward, the most anticipated ones is, of course, Book Lovers by Emily Henry, which Emily Henry, happy, makes me really happy. Book Lovers is about I think two people who are editors. I feel like this book might have similarities to 7 Days in June, and I will not complain if it does. It would be very stylistically different because Emily Henry's voice is pretty distinct and different probably from Tia Williams. So I'm sure they'll have different things to talk about, and book lovers, book readers, book editors are just people I adore because they put out things that I love. So can't wait. This is coming out in the summer, so it's gonna take some time before the book's out, but excited for it. There's Yenica, Where's Your Husband? I've heard a lot about this book. It's probably coming out next month. And one of the reviews for this book was talking about like what it's like to be single in a culture that's focused around women's marriage. African culture it's talking about, but even India is built around the same thing where like it seems like everyone's hyper focused on when a woman gets married. So I'm like, I can relate. Can I please read this book right now? Because I cannot tell you how much I relate. So yeah. So I pre-love this book. It'd have to be atrocious for me to be like, this is bad. So the 4th book, Blood and Ash series, this one's called The War of Two Queens. It's a romance fantasy series that are not like very high stakes, you know, everything's gonna work out in the end, yada yada yada, but they're fun, they're not high stakes. I'm not worried about the fates of any characters. I pretty much know how it ends and, you know, kind of the rough journey these characters will go on, but it's just fun, you know? Good old fun. And another book, this one's called Electric Idol, which is the 2nd book in this series of books that are retellings of Greek myths. The 1st book was a retelling of the Persephone story, which was called Neon Gods. This Electric Idol is about, it's about Cupid, and I forgot the sister's name. It's not Iris, it's something. Oh, it's gonna bother me. It's really gonna bother me. These books are actually pretty darn fun. They have like nice little throwbacks to the Greek myths and Greek culture and Greek gods, but it's not heavily reliant on them. It just takes the bones of the basic bones of that story and creates a whole new thing with it. And they're really fun. A lot of smut, sex, and other hijinks. And yeah, they're kind of great fun. I'm enjoying them, so I'm looking forward to this book. This book actually comes out next week. So, Anatomy, a Love Story by Diana Schwartz is also a book that comes out next week. I have heard a lot about this book. Everyone only has good things to say. It's a love story set a century ago. And it's between an aspiring doctor, a female doctor, I think the first ever, and a gravedigger. And I think they're trying to get bodies to, like, you know, practice surgery on or something. And I have no idea what happens, but everyone is raving about this book. I think maybe it has like gothic elements to it. Oh, but down for it. This Lucy Foley's The Paris Apartment. Lucy Foley is not the best thriller writers out there. In fact, most of her books are mediocre-ish, but she's consistent, which is what I like about her. It's not like amazing or bad. It's just like, you know what you're gonna get out of a Lucy Foley book. And I am always gonna read them once in a while because it's just comforting sometimes to have a consistent author who like does. I talked about how To Paradise by Hanya is coming out this year, which I would like to read more. There's The Maid by Nita Prose, which is already out, which I have to read. It's on my Kindle. There's something by Neil Seth, Tell Me How to Be or Who to Be, which I've ordered. It's coming, but that also is a January release. I have a lot of books that I want to read, but those are a few. There's also thrillers: Portrait of a Thief, Candy House, Book of Cold Cases. There's so many books and not enough time. Sorry if my voice was kind of annoying and scratchy and inaudible or incomprehensible. I can't help it, guys. I should go rest it though. It's kind of very itchy right now. So Happy New Year. What's your most anticipated book that's coming out this year, or your best book from last year? Hit me up, tell me about it. If it's something I've already read, if something I've already mentioned in this book, please, I would like to have a discussion, like seriously. So I would like more people to discuss books with. So if you read any of these books, do hit me up. Tell me about them. Yes, okay. Bye.